RPG Fans Retro Encounter, the podcast where we, talk about specific games, specific months, but also just talk about whatever RPG subject we want. I'm Mike Sollosi. Yep, this isn't Josh Curry. He's busy this weekend, so I'm recording and hosting this episode this week, and with me are two RPG fan luminaries. First, Alana Hagues.
Hey guys, Diving Falcons here.
And second, Robert Fenner.
Hi, it's Town's Car Marty on the boards for play in town and car.
Alright, and I'm Monsoon on the boards, and today we decided to talk about the Dreamcast in a special bonus round of Retro Encounter, because a few months ago we had a lot of fun in our Super Nintendo episode, and this is going to be a spiritual successor to this, and you never know, we might do a different platform-specific episode later. But generally, I think Alana and I have had enough excited exchanges on Twitter about one Dreamcast game in particular that we all sort of wanted to record this episode. So, before we get to the games specifically, Robert, why don't you go first? Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and the Dreamcast?
Sure. I was always a Sega kid, first and foremost. Like, I had I was like the only person in the neighborhood who had a Master System.
I've never seen a Master System in the wild.
Yeah. And I had a Genesis long before I had a Super Nintendo. So, it just kind of stood to reason to get a Dreamcast at the turn of the millennium. I got that shortly after moving to the UK, which was basically about a month after I got it, was around the time that they said they were discontinuing the console. And the Dreamcast is a weird system. I like it a lot. It's got a very limited but unique library. One of the things about it is that the Saturn had such a wide variety of original new RPGs, and with the exception of Grandia, almost none of those franchises lasted or made it over to the Dreamcast. Like, we never saw a follow-up to Panzer Dragoon Saga or Dragon Force, or even Shining Force skipped that generation, which I think is a shame.
I thought there were a couple Shining Force games on the Saturn, but we never got them.
Well, we got Shining Force 3 Part 1.
Right, but not Part 2.
We didn't... No, not Part 2 or 3, and we didn't get a Shining Force game on the Dreamcast.
Right,
or
okay.
Any of those spin-offs.
Aww.
So my understanding of it was in the right ballpark, but I didn't know the details. All right, so continue, man.
But we did get some very, very neat original RPGs, including one that I think you're probably going to be talking about very soon.
Sure.
It's
wonder what that one could be.
The Dreamcast has such a limited RPG library, but I think it's a very, very special one.
Right on. So, Alana, let's hear you and your personal history with the Dreamcast briefly before we start talking about the game I know you want to talk about.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, quite similar to Robert, really. Although I was more balanced between Nintendo and Sega, I did have Master System / Mega Drive, as they're known over here, and bounced up from the Saturn to the Dreamcast, because I think the Dreamcast was actually my first for that particular generation. So there was the PlayStation 2, the Xbox, but that was my first one, and kind of got it because I was just really a big Sonic fan at the time, but ended up branching off into RPGs through the Dreamcast and the PlayStation 1 at the same time. So while there is a very limited library, and I know, and I've only played the major players, like, there's part of me that wants to go back and buy one and just go and re-explore everything, I think, because I really like the Dreamcast, and I feel like it did a lot right, but it just didn't have the time, and it didn't have the backing, kind of a little bit like the Wii U, although the Wii U maybe isn't as good, let's say, but well, that's another discussion to have later on, and it doesn't try and do as many things. But the Dreamcast is quite a unique little system that did some really good stuff, and just really like it and really fond of it, and kind of miss Sega making good consoles and unique stuff, really. I think that's what the Dreamcast is really good at, is that it's got a really nice, unique little set of games, not just RPGs. Like, you've got some really good beat-em-ups, and you've got some really good like platforming games that some of which didn't see the light of day outside of that console generation. And just think the Dreamcast should be spoken about a little bit more.
Right on. And, well, I probably have less Sega nostalgia than either of you. The Dreamcast is the only Sega system I've ever owned. I was a Nintendo kid for the NES and SNES. Then, because the PlayStation had Final Fantasy and Mega Man, I switched. I didn't get an N64 or a Saturn. I had a PlayStation for the latter part of the 90s. And then I ended up buying a Dreamcast. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was after I already had a PS2. And I got one at a thrift shop for $20 or $25. And so I used it basically as a machine to play Soul Calibur and Crazy Taxi and a few other games and 2 RPGs in particular. Actually, well, no, 1 RPG in particular, because I didn't put any hard time into Grandia 2 until I got its PS2 version, which I know isn't as good. And I thought the Dreamcast was a bit of an oddity. It was sort of a tweener generation console, because it came out when the PlayStation was, still riding pretty high. Its release date was the same release date as Final Fantasy VIII, if I'm not mistaken.
9/9/99.
Yeah.
Who could forget?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it came out on the same day as Final Fantasy VIII, and the PlayStation had games still being released until early 2001 or so. So the Dreamcast fit in this awkward space between generations. It was the first system of that new generation, but ran on CDs and not DVDs, and it had limited online that we didn't really see great online on consoles until the PS Wii 60 generation. So it does a lot of weird things and has a very specific, unusual library, but there's a lot of quality in that library, and I still think Soul Calibur 1, which is the second Soul game, is probably the best one in that series. So even though the Dreamcast had a brief lifespan and a limited library, there's a lot of affection for it among gamers, including the three of us. And it's the only Sega system I've ever owned, but I had a lot of fun with it, and it's in the corner of my closet somewhere, but I'm not above bringing it out and trying to hook it up to a CRT to play Soul Calibur again. So yeah, we know that we love the Dreamcast, so Alana, it's time to wax poetic about Skies of Arcadia.
Hey, yeah, they wouldn't let me have a whole episode for it.
We thought about just doing that instead of a Dreamcast episode, but we decided to be a little bit more diverse.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I think that most people don't own it, and that it's pretty expensive. Even to buy a Dreamcast isn't too bad with it. But
no, I think me buying Skies of Arcadia was twice as expensive as the Dreamcast I bought to play it on. Oh, and as a quick warning, we will probably spoil Skies of Arcadia in the next 15 to 20 minutes heavily. So if you haven't played that, if you are worried about that, now's the time to stop listening and skip ahead 15 minutes or so. But so yeah, Skies of Arcadia, Dreamcast signature RPG. Alana, go.
Go. Okay. So I think anybody who knows me or has seen me on social media or any kind of thing knows that Skies is probably my favorite game ever. And I think Skies of Arcadia was the first RPG I played outside of Pokemon. So it was my first kind of experience. Yeah, so it was the first, other than Final Fantasy IX was probably the first other one that I played. I played them about the same time. But there was something quite particular about Skies that I liked, and it was kind of coming out of the kind of darker kind of Final Fantasy twist that happened. So I grew up watching my brother play Final Fantasy 7 and 8, and I always thought they were quite dark and kind of like, you can't play these, you're not old enough to play these. And so Skies carried this kind of optimism about it. And even though some really horrible things happen in it, but there are some really, I struggle to put words together with Skies because it's so simple, and but it does so many different things. So I think the best thing that it does is, there are two things that it does really well, and I think it does exploration really well, and it does battles really well. Not just turn-based battles, but the ship battles, and they're the two main things that I really take away from it, because the story is pretty standard. It's done really well, and I've said a couple of times before, I'm more than happy with tropes and cliches as long as they're done really well. I think Skies kind of fits all the gloves perfectly and fits everything and does everything so well. But so if I go into exploration, so basically, for anyone who doesn't know, Skies of Arcadia, you are like sky pirates. So you sail around the skies, hunting for treasure. Well,
Yeah,
you do hunt for
you're sky pirates in airships that are exploring floating continents and floating islands. And sorry to interrupt you, Alana, but I'd just like to say Skies of Arcadia has my favorite world map in any video game. It is beautiful and colorful and varied, and there are so many small things to discover, whether it's other ships flying around or pirates or like other pirates that you can fight, or little landmarks to discover and then report to the guild for some cash.
I love the landmark system.
There's a lot of
thing.
little things to do in this world map, and it's huge and gorgeous. And I never got tired of flying around in a sky pirate ship around this beautiful world map.
Never. Like, I'll still pick it up, like, now, like, I played it and playing it now, and I remember where some of them are, but it's just so fun to try and find all the discoveries, but there are things going around, so even though there are random encounters on the world map, there are also, like, these giant animals that are flying around that you can fight, or there's ships you can run into and challenge them and beat them down. It's just so good. That world map is amazing, and I wish there's not many games that have a world map that is mostly sparse. Like, there are just islands everywhere, and finding a new island, like, most continents you get a discovery for finding them, and it's just like, oh, I've just found something. It's just gotta tell everyone about it. It's just so cool. It's like you found an island. It's like, I'm gonna tell everyone and make money from it, and yeah, I just love...
Two of the major story arcs are in the it's Ixatak is under the green moon, and what's the country that's under the blue moon in the later
Yafutoma.
Yafutoma, yeah. Like when you first visit Ixataka and Yafutoma, the game makes a big deal of you discovering new continents, and it just adds a little bit of drama and excitement to just starting new chapters of the game, basically.
Yeah.
And it's so fun. And Alana, you, earlier in our conversation, you mentioned how the tone of Skies of Arcadia contrasted a little bit with the tone of the PlayStation Final Fantasy games, and that's a comparison that I usually make with Dragon Quest, because if you compare Final Fantasy with Dragon Quest, it's like Final Fantasy are these convoluted sci-fi epics, and Dragon Quest are like these beautiful, colorful little fairy tales. And Skies of Arcadia it's not the same as Dragon Quest exactly, but it has a tone of sort of optimism and fun.
Trademark Sega optimism.
Yeah,
bright world with characters
and color, and it's so much fun just sailing around the world and discovering new islands and just living in the Skies of Arcadia world. So Robert, you've played Skies as well, right?
I have, yeah. I have a great deal of affection for it. It is arguably the best RPG on the Dreamcast.
No arguments from me.
And I think it's a tragedy that it's not on Steam or readily available anywhere else.
Well, okay, there was a GameCube port.
There's the GameCube port, but
and,
I hear there's lots of audio errors in that.
Yeah, and
that's also inhibitively expensive.
Yes, it's really hard to find that port. The audio compressed a little bit, and I think it's because it's on one GameCube mini disc and not two CDs. That's part of it at least. And
funny story, I actually saw a copy of the GameCube version in a vape shop in Stratford Shopping Center a couple of weeks ago.
That's a fun place to find it.
Should I spend £70 on this?
Yeah, and also there's the whole issue of walking into a vape shop.
I wasn't in a vape shop; it was in the window.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Okay. That's your story, and you're sticking to it, is it?
My sick clouds, okay? My clouds of Arcadia.
Mm. Clouds of Arcadia is the name of your rig, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right.
You got me.
and also one neat thing about that GameCube version, there were some online connectivity features in Skies of Arcadia, the Dreamcast version, where who's the chubby little guy that joins your crew?
Pinta, little one with the spinning head.
Yeah. I'm terrible at remembering all these characters' names. But yeah, Pinta gives you little tasks that you can download through your Dreamcast controller and play in the game. The GameCube version adds a couple more side quests, and the Pinta's quest stuff are rewards in those side quests. And the GameCube version's fine, but it's not really the same as playing it on a Dreamcast. And
No.
And I mean, Robert, you mentioned that it's not on Steam yet. I think that Skies of Arcadia is a perfect candidate for a late Steam release, similar to Grandia 2 or Valkyria Chronicles, which are relatively recent Steam releases. Skies of Arcadia checks all the boxes. It's a little hard to find. It has cult popularity. It's a genre that can probably succeed in Steam sales and whatnot. I'm sure that it's at least being talked about behind the scenes for its potential Steam release. And if it were to release on Steam, at any time, as long as I'm not in poverty, I am picking it up.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, definitely.
So,
Am I
what?
am I
Go ahead.
remembering wrong, or does Skies have a VMU game that's like a first-person dungeon crawler?
Oh wow, I don't know.
Oh my goodness, I actually can't remember. It's been a while
I
since.
knew I had some kind of very primitive first-person dungeon crawler on my VMU, and I can't remember if it was from Skies or not. I think it was.
You may have. I didn't have any VMU stuff for that because maybe the Dreamcast I bought for $20 years and years ago was not was not the most feature complete Dreamcast. But
Right.
wow, and I'm not sure. I mean,
Maybe I should have researched this before.
Yeah, maybe we probably should have done a little bit of Googling before starting the recording of this episode. But there's so much to do in Skies of Arcadia. We mentioned discoveries. There's a few pirate bounties that you can hunt down that are like special boss battles. The most memorable of which are definitely the fake sky pirates.
Yeah, that's the GameCube version as well.
Those are only in GameCube?
Yeah, the bounty ones. The only ones that are in the Dreamcast version are the Balta and Gordo, but you don't get money for them.
I thought that a few of the GameCube bounties were in the Dreamcast version, but they just didn't have the bounty menu for them. Because I've played both versions.
Possibly then.
I might be wrong, because it's been a long time since I played it on Dreamcast.
Yeah, same. I mean, I don't remember fighting the Imposter Trio on the Dreamcast.
Okay, well, the Imposter Trio are like the best bounty fight in the GameCube version, at least. Even I apologize if I misspoke there before.
Are they not on Dreamcast? Because I swear I fought the Imposter Trio and I've never played it on GameCube.
I thought they were in the Dreamcast version, but then they were made into a bounty in the GameCube version because the Dreamcast version doesn't have like the bounty menu where you can collect money for defeating bounties in a store. But I thought that a couple of the bounties were in Dreamcast and they just added a few more for the GameCube version. Like, because that weird blonde dude in pink is GameCube only.
No, it's exclusive to GameCube.
Oh, really?
Oh, I guess I'm going crazy.
That's a bummer. Well, it's a great fight in the GameCube version. And,
it is.
But speaking of characters, the main cast of Skies is really appealing. I mean, Vice with his dope monocle eye patch, and how he's holding one sword sideways, and just flying through the sky with his two cool girlfriends, and the other characters that joined too are pretty fun. You have the gruff Drachma, the Gilder, the guy with the badass coat, and then Prince Pretty with his special shield move. That's all he's worth for.
No.
Really? Come on. I
mean, right. I only use the special shield move for the bonus fights. I don't use it for the final.
Enrique is by far the lamest of those three.
Enrique is best girl.
Enrique is best girl, but in the best possible way. He is if you put the time into him, he is really good. So, like, his final super move is really, really good. Like, I've never taken Gilder into the final boss fight. I've never taken Gilder or Drachma into the final boss fight, actually. But I think it's because Enrique feels like the most plot relevant out of the three characters. So that's probably why I take why I take Enrique with me. Gilder is probably my favorite just because he's kind of the badass, like,
he's
I'm
the
a
most
real
fun.
Pirate. Yeah, I'm a real pirate. I'm just going to go around and take treasure and
his first super move that was it called Gunslinger?
Yeah,
that one is a really good screen clearer, and he's maybe has the most roguish personality of anyone in the game, even though Vice has that in spades as well. Gilder's just a lot of fun as a character, but I use Drachma the most in the end of the game because I like his subplot with Little Jack and the Purple Colossus, Purple Gigas.
Yes.
Yeah, purple cake. God, I'm mixing up all the terms. I should have done more research before recording this. And also, I just had him use Spirit Charge every single turn. So just
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
just to let Vice, Ica, and Fina cast more spells and do more super moves. But I'm not going to deny that Gilder's status prevention thing is really good for one of the super bosses in the GameCube version, and Enrique's shield is really useful for certain fights. But I use Drachma the most at the end of the game.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
maybe we should change gears a little bit so this doesn't become the Skies of Arcadia podcast, even though we all love Skies dearly, obviously. Now, Robert, you before we started recording, you mentioned to me a couple other Dreamcast RPGs that I had not heard of. So let's run through a few of those.
Couple of weird outliers. Apologies in advance to any fans of Elemental Gimmick Gear or Lack of Love. I've only played a tiny bit of those.
Aw.
First I've
But
heard of either of those.
I'd like to talk about, in particular, D2, the follow-up to the sort of horror Myst-style game by Kenji Ino's Warp. And shifting gears from the first game, it moves away from the graphic adventure setting, and it was, in fact, an action RPG. It shares characters with D and Enemy Zero, or rather, it shares digital actors, as Kenji Ino calls his characters, where you play as this lady named Laura, whose plane has crashed in the Canadian wilderness. And there's survival aspects, like you have to hunt animals for food and stay warm. But there's also these random encounters with these alien monsters who, their comet that struck, they were riding on this comet that struck this plane. So you'll occasionally run into corpses that have been reanimated with these alien parasites that you have to fight. And it kind of, like, the battles take the form of, like, kind of like a Virtua Cop or Time Crisis kind of deal, where it's in first person and you're aiming at these aliens that are darting around the screen, and you get rewarded with experience points and you level up. It's a very weird and not entirely successful mix of survival horror and RPG and survival mechanics, but like nobody else had really tried that at the time. I mean, Kenji Ino is nothing if not unique in what he sets out to do. And one of the things I really like about this game is there's a boss encounter with an infected airline stewardess who picks you up with tentacles and throws you all around this broken plane and says to buckle your seatbelt for turbulence.
Amazing.
That's a pretty good moment. And
Amazing.
now you said action RPG with survival horror elements, and
Yeah.
I mean that immediately fired a synapse in my brain that made me think of Parasite Eve a little bit. Would you say
It's
that?
got a
Yeah.
lot in common with Parasite Eve.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it plays, like, the fighting plays completely differently, but
Right.
The exploration and sort of trying to solve this mutation mystery happening, well, in the wilderness rather than New York City. It's got a very similar bent, like you're running around abandoned little towns.
So
and
it
gasping
at least shares some surface similarities with it, but it's obviously not. Neither of them is obviously ripping off the other, but just
Yeah.
there's a little bit of overlap in that Venn diagram.
For sure. I think that's probably one of the reasons why I like it. The thing about Warp's games is they weren't always fun to play, but I think this is probably Warp at their most successful. There's like the most gameplay here, and it's not hostile to the player in some of the ways their previous games were.
Wow.
It's great that you can describe some games as being openly hostile to the player.
Did either of you ever play Enemy Zero? It was on Saturn and then again on PC.
I did not.
No, I didn't.
Enemy Zero was this game with... It was another one that was a little bit like D in that it borrowed graphic adventure elements. So you were wandering around this spaceship, collecting inventory items and trying to solve a mystery. But in between rooms in the spaceship, there was these corridors that you'd have to walk down. And these corridors had invisible monsters in them. And you had this gun that you had to charge up and locate the monsters by a beeping radar, which was not omnidirectional. So you had to charge up this gun and hope that you were facing your monster, which you could only fire at point-blank range. And if you charged it too much, it wouldn't fire, it would overheat. And if you didn't charge it enough, it just wouldn't fire. So that was a nightmare to play.
Yeah, it sounds like a game
Yeah,
that's a nightmare to play, but some people will probably defend it in spite of its nightmarish systems.
Saving and loading took a battery on your save order, which could not ever be restored. So you had limited saves and limited loads.
Wow.
Um,
Good grief.
yeah, interesting ideas, but not a good game. But that's not a Dreamcast game, so I've gone on too much.
Okay, sure.
The second game I'd like to talk about is Desperia, which is a Japan-only title by a little developer that I have a lot of affection for called Denno Aizo, who made one of my favorite PlayStation 1 horror games called Hell Knight. Denno Aizo were working with Atlas for a while, and Desperia is kind of a follow-up to Hell Knight in that it's this cyberpunk horror sort of FMV adventure / RPG. And it's about it's set 20 years after World War III in this like post-dystopic Japan. And you play as this lady named Allura who works for the new governing body, which is called Church. And she's an assassin out to subdue psychic terrorists. So like you make your way
Sounds
around.
like a really great anime.
It's great.
It does.
An assassin out to subdue psychic terrorists. That will get a one episode of Netflix watch from me for sure.
It feels a little clunky, like you're navigating around like these pre-rendered 360-degree environments and then transitioning between them. And on the way, battles are there's these battles with other psychics, and it plays a little bit like a Shin Megami Tensei title, but you send out different parts of your brain to fight against your opponent's brain. So you've got maybe 3 weird brain monsters, and
do they represent like your lobe versus your medulla oblongata versus your cortex or something?
Essentially, yeah.
And
they would level up, mutate a bit.
Do they have advantages against each other? Like you're playing rock paper scissors, or like a Fire Emblem swords, axes, lances with different parts of your brain?
There was a sort of rock paper scissors aspect to it. It's been a very long time since I played it, but
This thing sounds bonkers.
it's bizarre, and the game begins with a lady snorting a worm. It's got such a weird and cool atmosphere, and I'm sad that it never got a wider or localized release. But it's one of those things that you can blunder through, and if you've got rudimentary knowledge of Japanese, you can at least read the menus and configure your brain. But it's neat, and it's got that sort of pre-rendered kind of ugly Japanese late PlayStation 1 era style that I find really charming.
I mean, it's not always ugly. The best pre-rendered backgrounds from that late '90s era are often quite gorgeous, and they're part of why it's a little bit difficult to port those games nowadays, because the original code and art from a lot of those pre-rendered scenes. I know that's the case at least in Panzer Dragoon Saga and some of the Final Fantasy games from that era. Like it isn't around anymore. But
or it's super compressed and artifacted.
Exactly, yeah. So I have a lot of affection for weird 90s pre-rendered backgrounds, but much less affection for weird 90s polygons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no polygons in this. It's just all all pre-rendered characters on backgrounds, and I think it looks really neat.
Yeah, I was saying, looking at it beforehand, it's aged really well. Like, it's really nice looking, and I really like the interface on it. So,
it's cool. I would highly recommend checking out their previous game, Hell Knight, for PS1, which did get an English release in the UK anyway. It's a similar kind of world, but it's set in the sewers of Tokyo. So you're running away from a monster, but you're also interacting with like these outcasts of society who have been driven underground, and it's got a very similar visual style. But I guess the most notable thing about Desperia is that most of its key staff went on to develop Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne and the 2 Digital Devil Saga games. So
Cool.
some of those ideas moved on.
Yeah.
I love Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2. They're
Hmm.
I like those probably better than Nocturne. But yeah, I'm looking at some Desperia art as well. It's Desperia with an I instead of an AI after the P, because if you look for Desperia, you just get a bunch of like guides about a certain part of Dragon Quest VI.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
but so yeah, Desperia is a really neat and cool looking Dreamcast game. Just from looking at this Google image search. But yeah, I had not heard of it prior to you bringing it up, man. That's
Yeah.
super neat.
It's neat. I found it in a used game store here in London, and immediately fell in love with it after messing with it for the better part of a month. So it's a delight.
Well, I don't know if that's as likely to get a Steam release as
It
Skies of
probably
Arcadia
won't.
is.
I think ISO are long closed.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if most of them have moved on to Atlas, but Japanese companies, they don't they don't like putting things on PC, do they? So.
No, I think that a lot of the recent JRPG to PC stuff has been to try and get a chunk of that huge North American and European Steam audience. But
yeah.
and I mean, you think of Japanese PC developers, there's not that many outside of Falcom.
Yeah, I mean the rest is just aerogay people.
Yeah. And well, we're not going to be talking about those, even if there are some
No, we're
Dreamcast. Even if there are Dreamcast
Please, no.
aerogays, I haven't done the research, I'm afraid. But let's move on to something else. We've brought it up
Yes.
a couple times in the podcast, but Grandia 2 was a Dreamcast game before it had ports to PS2 and PC much later. And I mean, I mentioned how I don't have much love for late 90s polygons. If you want to see some polygons in an RPG, they're all over the place in Grandia 2.
Dorito boys.
Yeah, it moved
Yes.
away from Grandia 1's uglier scene polygons, but nice-looking character sprites, to slightly better polygons, except for everything this time. And I think the first thing you have to talk about with Grandia 2 is that battle system. Because it flows beautifully. It's basically turn-based, but characters have a speed stat, and their turn speed is visualized on a meter, and you can manipulate your own characters and enemies' positions on that meter with stuns and delay moves, which sounds maybe hard to understand without a visual, but but once you get the hang of it, it is one of the best turn-based battle systems of that era for sure. And they refined it further in Grandia 3, but in Grandia 2 is where I sort of think of it as being the best version of it. But even outside of that great battle system, it's a pretty solid traditional Japanese RPG. The main characters are pretty fun. You get some really interesting English voice work with the Grandia games had pretty bad dialogue and voice acting, but it is the Little Mermaid. Jodie Benson is one of the voice actors of the English version.
Cam Clark.
She is.
Yep,
yes.
and Cam Clark.
Liquid Snake himself.
Yep,
is the
Liquid
hero.
Snake.
Yeah, solid,
Cam
yeah.
Clark, Leonardo, and Liquid Snake. Leonardo the Ninja Turtle, and Liquid Snake is the main character, Ryodo, and and female Shepherd plays Alana. So it's you have the
She
you
does.
have the Little Mermaid, Fem Shep, and Leonardo the Ninja Turtle as your three main characters, and it's which is quite a collection, and it feels like a little bit of a basic JRPG to me. Like some of the like big drama moments in the second half of the game just seem a little too out there. I don't think I like Grandia 2 as much as Grandia 1 even, but as a Dreamcast game with awesome combat and some fun characters, you can do a lot worse. It's a very very good Japanese RPG.
Yeah,
I guess
very-
for people who haven't played games these old, I guess one of the closest comparisons to Grandia's battle system might be Trails in the Sky.
A little. There is turn manipulation
it's different,
in it.
but there's turn. Yeah.
And it was Final Fantasy X has that.
I just remember Child of Light completely borrowed Grandia's battle system.
If you like indie RPGs, the last two Zeboyd games, including the upcoming one, Cosmic Star Heroine, but the last couple Zeboyd games, Penny Arcade 3 and 4 and Cosmic Star Heroine, all almost wholesale borrow the Grandia battle system. But
Okay.
it really works. It's you see people moving up the turn meter, which isn't that meaningfully different from the old ATB system from Final Fantasy games. But you can like shove people up and down the meter to delay their turns, stun them, and if they're preparing for a move, like charging up a spell by hanging out at the very top part of the meter or the far right part of the meter, you can knock them all the way back with a stun move. There's a lot. There's it manipulating that is.
They'll do the same to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. You get used to it pretty quickly, and it's a really fun version of a turn-based battle system that I never got tired of. Like, that battle system carried me through Grandia 2, even though I thought it dragged a little bit towards the end of the game. But it's worth playing. We've had one of our RPG fan staff members streaming it the past few months. I don't think they're finished with it yet, though, at the time of this recording.
They have finished,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, they recently finished. All right, it's been a while since I've tuned in, I guess. And it is available on Steam as well as PS2 and Dreamcast.
Yeah. We haven't mentioned the really cheesy spell names, because I think they're important.
Yeah, they're...
And the quote lines, like, good grief.
Yeah, and like brackets and stuff in them. It's
Wow.
yeah, they made some weird choices in naming things in that game.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is pretty cool. It manipulate, like you compared it to the Legend of Heroes games. You manipulate space in with certain spells. Like, they have areas of effect that you can mess around with. It does a lot of good things in RPG combat. RPG fan combat. That should be a podcast. But yeah, Grandia 2 is pretty good. I only played the beginning of it on Dreamcast and played it on PS2 much later. But because our Grandia 2 being in the Dreamcast disc tray means that I wasn't playing Soul Calibur or Skies of Arcadia, which was always seemed like a better choice to me. But it's pretty good, and it's easy to get on Steam nowadays.
Yeah, thank goodness for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you can get all the main games except for, with the exception of the two offshoots, quite readily available now between Steam and PSN.
You don't need to play Grandia Extreme. Just listen to the.
You really don't.
No, listen to the 4 battle themes of Grandia Extreme on YouTube for about 20 minutes, and then you've gotten the best parts of Grandia Extreme.
Okay.
I think Battle 3 is pretty freaking good. But anyway, that's Grandia 2, pretty good Dreamcast game. Do we have anything else we want to talk about before we start? Talk about the confusingly named classes of Phantasy Star Online.
Yeah, the really confusing classes. No, I don't think so. So I suppose we just jump into Phantasy Star Online, I
Sure,
guess.
yeah.
I've got a Kusoge to talk about, but let's do Phantasy Star Online first.
Kusoge.
Yeah. So now I don't have a lot of personal history with Phantasy Star Online. It was more of a oversight that I watched my brother play again. But I think it's pretty impossible to not mention it because of how revolutionary it was. And it's kind of, Robert was saying online a couple of days before we recorded this, why does Sonic Team not do anything so radical or exciting anymore? Phantasy Star is a really good example of them jumping out of the box a little bit and going, let's make an online RPG on consoles, and that's basically unheard of in 99, 2000 when it was announced. And I think what I remember is with most top-down MMOs you had on the PC, this one was kind of more over the shoulder, so it feels more like a normal, something that puts me off online RPGs is the kind of top-down perspective. And so this one looks accessible and it plays really well from what I remember. So you just go around. You can either go around in groups, so you can have codes to go into each other's games, a little bit like Dark Souls 3 kind of online co-op stuff, or you can go on your own and people will join you. But it's a pretty revolutionary game. It's very different from the previous Phantasy Star games, which are just traditional turn-based. Those I've never played, and that's for another time.
Ooh, gotta fix that.
Yeah, I have had a copy of Phantasy Star 4 staring at me for several years now. I really want to get to that, because that's one of the great sort of lost Genesis games that I know I'll like when I finally get around to playing it. But yeah, Phantasy Star Online is a different beast entirely. It's if not the first, one of the very first sort of online RPG interpretations for a console, and being based on this niche popular series that a lot of people love the old Phantasy Star games, it really sort of spun off into its own monster and had a couple sequels on the GameCube and DS and probably more that I'm just not aware of. And there was a recent
360.
there was a recent Vita one that
There is, yeah.
yeah, that people were for a while people were clamoring for an English release of that, but I don't think it ever happened.
There's a fan translation of the PC version.
Sure, I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah.
But
it's baffling that they're not putting that out officially. That's ridiculous.
But the whole online phase of the Phantasy Star series started on the Dreamcast, and it was really popular for a while. Like I know, oh god, I don't remember any of the class names, but when people were discussing strategies about Phantasy Star Online on forums, it almost sounded like they were talking in a foreign language. They were talking about the different types of characters they were. Like, are either of you familiar with those? Because it always confused me a little.
I remember the main names of them, but yeah, like with the list in front of me.
Cast, I think I remember that.
Oh god, see, I don't even know that deep. So I know like the general ones. So there's hunters, rangers, and forces, but they're not what they sound like. So forces are magic-based characters, which is like no, god, like that doesn't sound right. But rangers are weapon-based. It's like, well, that's archery, isn't it? And that's my brain's just ticking the wrong way for Phantasy Star. And then the balanced characters are hunters. And it's like, but actually they sound like the same thing to me. But then, like you say, was it whom? I don't know how they break down specifically, but I remember that it was quite complex kind of class system.
Yeah, because, I mean, there were humans and Newmans.
Oh god!
And a couple different species.
Cyborgs.
Yeah,
had a funny
what are
name.
they called? Are the cyborgs Newmans? I'm not. But I remember like that when you combine them into like the different character types. Were those casts? Were those the cyborgs? No,
possibly.
But I remember like a human hunter is a humar or a humarl. And a human force is a fomar or a fomarl, and people would use these portmanteau versions to describe the different classes, and it just completely baffled me when I was Phantasy Star Online curious and trying to figure out what was going on. But a lot of people played Phantasy Star Online. And there's a lot of positive memories that people have for them. And I remember the DS version, I think, was Phantasy Star Zero. And
in conjunction with Tri-Ace, I think.
Yeah, right. So and many people spent thousands of hours into those. So
I didn't dig that. It didn't have the same magic.
Yeah,
as in Spark.
Most of that affection comes from the Dreamcast and GameCube versions of the game, I think.
Those huge characters. And just so nice. Yeah.
But I never played them because I have a bit of a predilection against MMOs in general or online games in general because I'm worried what they could do to my addictive personality as someone that's
Sorry.
It's all right. It's just, I mean, I say that and I've had thousands of hours into Diablo 3, but maybe not thousands.
I guess the nice thing about the Dreamcast versions was that you could play them offline, which was important to me because I had AOL, and AOL would not allow my Dreamcast to connect. So I remember having to take my Dreamcast around a friend's house that did not have AOL, so we could play online with other people.
Yeah, those early DSL and T1 lines, but before most of America and the UA had cable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Phantasy Star Online. I guess none of the three of us have a huge attachment to it, but it's definitely one of the signature RPGs on the Dreamcast.
It's like a Diablo style game, which isn't really my kind of thing, but I really love the dressing that they put around it with the bright sci-fi setting. It's a bit of a departure from the rest of the Phantasy Star series, so it was never my favorite, but I did enjoy my time with it, and it would be nice to see more of that in future.
Yeah, it would.
It would be.
If they brought back Phantasy Star, would you prefer it was an online style game, or would you prefer it to be like maybe a theoretical Phantasy Star 5 be more like the first 4 games? and with a relatively traditional Japanese RPG, but with this colorful, interesting sci-fi setting.
It depends on what they do. I mean, I think if it's like
Yeah, I guess execution's more important than concept.
yeah, like if they go for like an I am Setsuna kind of thing, I don't think I'd be too interested in that.
Well, maybe the best solution is just to go and find a version of Phantasy Star 4 to play. Final Fantasy Star, I'd play that. Final Fantasy Star 4. Wow, that'd be really interesting. Anyway, so now you were talking about some kusokeis earlier, which is translates into something inappropriate.
Yup.
So is there
Bad game,
some Japan-only
polite.
terrible Dreamcast RPG that you put too much time into?
Yeah, this wasn't Japan only. This got a worldwide release.
All right.
I did.
A lot of people fondly remember Sting's Evolution series, a duo of two roguelikes for the Dreamcast, which later got released on GameCube. But I'm not talking about Evolution. I'm talking about the poor man's Evolution, which is a little Sega game called Time Stalkers. Are either of you familiar with the Landstalker series?
Yeah, Landstalker and I think Lady Stalker was the other one.
Lady Stalker
Yeah.
and Dark Savior, the sort of grittier Saturn entry. Each of those was an isometric Zelda-style game, which they all looked very good. They played with varying degrees of success and frustration. Time Stalkers was a departure, and that it was a very poor roguelike that was meant to bring all of these Landstalker and some Shining in the Darkness characters together in kind of like a crossover RPG like Project X Zone. But Climax had so few characters that this really seemed like a bit of a pointless exercise. You play as this guy named Sword.
Awesome.
The sword-wielding
brilliant.
Sword, who's been teleported to this island, I think called the Negative Zone, or the Void Dimension, which is slowly becoming populated by characters from other games in the Landstalker series who have just been teleported in. And it's really just an excuse to bring all these characters together, and you wander around these very samey, randomly generated dungeons, fighting very poorly programmed turn-based encounters. And there's not much story, and for some reason I put maybe 20 hours into it and beat it.
Wow.
But one thing that I will say is that it had this kind of, maybe this is why I beat it, it had this weird little risk-reward mechanic called the yogurt trick, where
wait, slow down a second.
Yogurt?
The yogurt trick.
The yogurt trick. Okay, I don't know why they just called the game the yogurt trick, because that would have sold 1 million copies. But all right, continue. Please tell us all about the yogurt trick.
Yogurt the hamster was a secret character in Shining Force 1.
Yogurt the hamster does the yogurt trick. Game of the year material.
He's this little hamster with like a mechanical helmet, and he was meant to be a debug character, but they liked him so much they put him in as a secret character.
Can you blame them?
And Yogurt is all over Time Stalkers for some reason. There's portraits of him hanging in people's houses. I think there's an entire yogurt house.
Maybe the whole game is just a dream that Yogurt's having.
It might as well be. So you find a yogurt ring in the dungeon, and if you put on the yogurt ring, it transforms you into yogurt, and you walk around and this silly little music plays, and Yogurt is a complete weakling, and he's forced to level 1, and when he levels up, he stays at level 1. But the benefit of this is, I mean, you can continue to level up and just roll over level 1, level 1, level 1, level 1, and the amount of experience required to level up stays the same. And the amount of levels you've gained as Yogurt, when you take off the Yogurt ring, level up all at once. So you can just, fight as many things as you think you can manage as Yogurt, and then take off the ring, and boom, you're level 50. And that is how I beat this terrible game.
So you used a power leveling Yogurt trick.
Power of Yogurt.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You mean, you're saying it's a bad game, but I mean, I want to do that really badly.
Yogurt is adorable, I gotta say. He is the high point.
I think Yogurt needs his own game. They should just abandon the whole stock. They should make Yogurt Stalkers in 2017. It's just all about Yogurt.
Beyond the Beyond 2, Yogurt's
Beyond
in the Beyond.
He's in Beyond the Beyond?
No, he's not, but it's the same people.
Okay, yeah,
It's,
because that's a
it's,
terrible that's a
right.
terrible PS1 RPG.
That
You know what?
is-
I'm mistaken. I'm mixing up Climax and Camelot
Oh,
because
okay, never
they
mind.
they
I-
work together on Shining Force, I believe.
Okay, yeah,
But
I
yeah,
cannot remember who did Beyond the Beyond, but I did not like that game.
the same people as Golden Sun for some reason.
Oh,
Go
yeah,
figure.
yeah,
wow.
Camelot did Golden Sun,
They
right?
Yeah.
did.
And Golden Sun is pretty good.
Golden Sun is pretty good, but Beyond the Beyond is just terrible. For
Yeah,
no,
that's awful.
no reason.
They learn.
Yeah. Anyway, that's me and Time Stalkers. It's not good.
Wasn't there
But
like
Yogurt's
some
pretty. Yogurt sounds pretty dope.
He is dope.
Maybe we should bring him back for I don't know, somehow foist him into Smash 5 Fracas or whatever they decide to call it.
Or if they put out like another one of those
Fracas.
Sonic racing games.
Oh yeah, those Sonic racing games are all pretty. I played the Steam version of the latest one, and I was shocked at how much I liked it. It was really solid. Yogurt would be a perfect candidate for wacky racing game. Vice from
Yeah.
Skies of Arcadia is in the last one.
Oh,
It
sweet.
is.
Yeah.
I literally bought it just for Rogue's Landing.
Right.
That's the extent of this obsession with this game. Rogue's Landing is incredible.
It
But-
looks great, and it gets pretty hard because to pass some of the later challenges, you need to be really good at drifting. But those but those Sega racing games are actually quite excellent, sort of arcadey style racing games. And let's see, Vice, Fina, and Ica also show up in Valkyria Chronicles.
They do.
Which I think shares some staff with the whole Sega Grand RPG tradition. So there's somebody from Phantasy
Yes.
Star from Panzer Dragoon Saga and Skies of Arcadia snuck into the Valkyria Chronicles team. But
Yeah.
and Vice and Ica are both above average stormtrooper and scout respectively.
Yeah, I found Vice was the best stormtrooper, I think, because he has an ability which literally, if you throw him into a crowd, his stats will double, I think, and it's just like, okay.
I think maybe Rosie's a little better than him, but she's a story character that has slightly overpowered abilities. But no, Vice and Ica are both really good in and totally viable characters in Valkyria Chronicles, which is
They're boss.
and Fina is the medic, but if you read the manual, it's actually identical triplets. Only one of them is named Fina, which is an odd justification to choose. But all three of them are looking good on the PS3 and recent Steam.
Yeah.
So let's see, Dreamcast RPGs, Dreamcast Wander Around a City games, Dreamcast recent
Feed the
Kickstarter
cat.
games. I guess we have to talk about Shenmue, don't we?
Yes, we do.
All right.
Yeah.
I only
Shenmue-
played the very beginning of Shenmue 1, and my brain was not wired to enjoy like slow moving open worlds the way it is now. Like I probably would enjoy Shenmue now more now that I'm 30 instead of when I tried to play it when I was 17.
Unbridled hubris.
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't have put a ton of time into Shenmue, and I'm not and I didn't really follow the development of Shenmue 3, but did either of you? I'm assuming yes, both of you having played more Dreamcast than I have.
I played it briefly, again, like Phantasy Star. It was kind of something I watched rather than played, but when I played it, I just goofed around. Like, I get the kind of complicated, kind of like, it's kind of meant to be not real life, but a little bit more interactive. Like, looking at it now, the kind of mouth movements and graphical, like, what was praised at the time are so awkward now, and it's kind of like watching a really awkward dub. But when we just kind of goofed around in it, really. So, like, the two things I really remember is you could put, like, money into little PopCap machines and get little toys out of it, and we would do that every day, all the time. It wouldn't matter how much money, how much yen we had, we would do that.
I guess they were Gashapon machines, except they probably called them PopCap for
Something
the translation.
like that.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. And then there was some bizarre specific side quest or quest where you had to go into a warehouse and do something with forklift trucks, and we would just spend hours and hours racing each other in forklift trucks, me and my brother, or any of the NPCs. And I remember Shenmue fondly, but those are the only two things I remember doing in it, apart from all the awkward conversations you would have with people. I mean, it was pretty revolutionary for the time. And I suppose when you think about it, the kind of evolution that we've gone to is, well, stuff like Heavy Rain and that are quite similar, but not. Yeah, I mean, yeah, take a pick like what you want from Heavy Rain, because but there's less movement in Heavy Rain as well. Like you can control the main character of Shenmue, who I can't remember his name.
Ryo Hazuki.
Yep.
That's it, Ryo. Whereas there were lots of quick time events, and then
a lot of Ryos and Ryos in Japanese fiction in general.
Yeah, there is. But I think Shenmue 3 is a good time for Shenmue 3 to come along. Definitely, where we've had all the improvements to that particular genre, so it would be nice to see what they do with it. And
not only just how the genre has grown, I think that Shenmue 1 and 2 had a lot of really neat ideas that were ahead of their time, but the technology wasn't quite there yet. Because when I think of the earliest open world games I really liked, I think mostly of the PlayStation 2 Grand Theft Auto games and maybe Jak 2 for the PlayStation 2, where just they moved faster than Shenmue did and were a little more goal-oriented than Shenmue did. And now you have Ubisoft with their open world action games which are practically just notebooks full of meters that you fill up. But everything seems so slow and clunky in Shenmue 1 and 2 because they had these open world ideas of quotidian games where everyday activities are a part of gameplay that seems like something that you would almost expect out of a similar genre game nowadays, but it just seems baffling when you played it in 99 or 2000. And
if you want to play a fun version of Shenmue, I mean, play one of the Yakuza games.
Right.
That's basically what that series became.
That's a better comparison than the two that I made, but I've never played a Yakuza game.
Ooh, I recommend it, and it's Yakuza 5 is going to be free on PS Plus next month.
Ooh, really?
Oh, wow.
Well, next month. I mean, we're recording this in
August 2016.
Yeah. This I'm not sure exactly how the episode shakes out, but how the list shakes up. But this will probably be published in late August or early September. But
but then you missed it.
Oh, rats.
Oh.
But yeah, anyway, I've called it Shenmue incorrectly apparently for many years now. But Shenmue is interesting in what it tried to do before the explosion of open world action games. And it's interesting to talk about, but I never liked trying to play it, and I don't know if it would be very easy to go back to if I tried playing it in 2016 either. So I'm really leery about it.
Yeah, they hadn't aged well, I would say. They're definitely products of their time, and like quite a lot with the Dreamcast, probably a little bit early for their time as well. So like with a little bit more refinement, they could have been really good, and just kind of a sad story of the Dreamcast, really.
It was too good. It was gone too soon, and I wonder if it was because the timing of it was seemed good, but it was competing with a lot of high-profile PlayStation and PS2 stuff early on. But it was still using CDs as media. It didn't get enough of an early foothold to make it a meaningfully better choice than the systems that came a few years after it. And even though it had this really cool, unusual library, and still the best version of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, I will say until forever, but it really sort of went out with a whimper, and I was able to find a copy in a thrift store probably, I think it was 2003 is when I got it, for $20, which is not a whole lot. So it's a bit of a a hipstery system that it was cool before others were cool. But I don't know
everybody who's owned one fondly remembers it.
Yes, that is definitely true. Mm-hmm. I don't love the Dreamcast controller even. It gave me blisters. No, it gave me blisters on my thumbs doing fighting game motions on it because I played a lot of Soul Calibur and a lot of Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2 on it. And I got thumb blisters from that very sharp D-pad and not great and sort of badly Oh, okay. The buttons aren't bad. The face buttons aren't bad, but they're a little hard compared to the softer buttons on the PS2.
Yeah,
And
they are.
and yeah,
They're small and hard.
Yeah, I
like
got
little aspirins.
yeah, exactly. I got blisters on both. It's like it's like playing fighting games on that with for too long is like the equivalent of stepping on Legos barefoot. I got tiny cuts and blisters on my thumbs playing fighting games in the Dreamcast, but. You're absolutely right. Everyone that had a Dreamcast fondly remembers it, and even though it didn't have a ton of RPGs, it certainly had some memorable ones. Alana said that Skies is her number one RPG of all time. It's definitely in my top 10, and yeah, Skies of Arcadia alone, I think, justifies the Dreamcast being a conversation piece.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Whew. So, let's see, do we have anything else we want to talk about in our second console-specific episode of Retro Encounter?
Have we done it? Have we done it, folks?
Have we? Have we talked about every single Dreamcast RPG? All the ones? Maybe we should have done a little bit more research on Phantasy Star before starting this. Or at least I should have. I blame myself.
Don't say that.
Okay, all right. Well, anyway.
We'll edit that part out.
Okay, well, I probably won't edit this part
professional.
out. Well, I'm not professional, and then this part is probably staying in, but we'll see. Anyway, thank you, listeners, for listening to us discuss the Dreamcast with so much fondness over the past hour or so. If you want to find us, we're on iTunes, and you can find the Retro Encounter RSS feed on the main page. We put out episodes every Wednesday, and around half of our episodes are sort of games of the month that we discuss in over two-part episodes, and then we have bonus rounds like this one where we discuss whatever we want. You can find us on Twitter. I'm at TheRealMonsoon, and Robert.
I'm at MissAnthroBob.
And
I'm
Alana?
always looking to talk to people.
All right. And Alana.
See, I'm talking over people.
Oh man.
Yay.
Third time, Alana. What's your Twitter handle?
It's my name, so at Alana Hagues. But yeah, just talk to me about Skies and I'm happy. But anything else is good.
And please send her inspirational quotes as spoken by Vice.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Because I always need motivation, and Vice is pretty good for that. So,
One of the most positive RPG heroes ever conceived. And you can email us at retro@rpgfan.com. Please send us emails. If you do, we'll bring them up on there for sure, because we read everything that's directed at us. And also discuss the bonus round episodes or the main episodes of Retro Encounter on rpgfan.com's forums. It's in the Game Journals section of the forum. And I think that's all I have to bring up. Right now, the RPG Fan Retro Encounter crew is playing Valkyria Chronicles, a game that we mentioned a couple times in this podcast. And next month, I'm not sure if we voted it yet, but September is going to be Visual Novels Month for RPG fans. So I don't know. We were talking about playing Danganronpa or Steins Gate or 999.
They're the top ones, I think.
Right. Yeah. The poll hasn't finished yet.
Sorry, you'll see me on there. So whatever
cool.
we're playing, I'll be there.
All right, so yeah, listen for a visual novel in September, and that's about it. Thanks for listening, everyone.
If you're feeling really frisky, leave us an iTunes review.
Yeah.
A good one. A good one.
Any iTunes review, really. We're desperate. Oh, not really.